Because you see in Ephesians 2:10, it says we are his workmanship. And that sounds like, somebody making something in the garage or a factory. But no, it's in an artist's studio. The word is poema, and it means poem, like we have, but it's more than that. It's an artistic word, and it really means work of art or masterpiece. And so God says that you are a work of art. Now this morning when you were getting ready, now actually I feel a little more like a work of art because Maria did such a good job on making me up. But when I look in the mirror, and probably when you look in the mirror in the morning, the first thing you think is that, oh, what a work of art. But that's what God thinks all the time of each one of us. You are a work of art. Now, a lot of times, my daughter, one of them is an artist, and she paints things and she'll hang them on the wall, or she'll make something and she'll put it, in a shelf to be displayed. And that's what artists do all the time. They make it just to look at. But when God made each of us his work of art, he didn't make us just to look at. He didn't think, I'm just going to sit back and admire her. No, he says, I have purposes for her. And he had 3 purposes that I can see in making each one of us. The first one was that he wanted to be with us. He said Adam had all these animals and he named them, and he said, but there's no one like him to be with him. So he made Eve. But God is a person, and he looked around, he says, well, I need someone like me. So he made man and woman. And he says he made us in his image. And so there's the 2 parts there. The one is to be with us. Let me tell you, my husband is wonderful. We've been married 40 years. We dated for a long time. He was slow. And he's always very busy, but he wants to be with me all the time. Now, that's really wonderful and, encouraging, except that I'm an introvert, and I want to be by myself because I'm with people most of the time. And so I'm going to the beach for a week, thank you. And he says, oh, I will miss you so much. And I said, I know, I'll miss you too, but I'll really enjoy being by myself for a little while. But God said, no, I want to be with you all the time. And the God of the universe who made everything said, I want to be with you. Come, I want you to be with me. And then he said he made us in his image. Just like the child who looks like someone, God made us to look like him. And he said that image is for the purpose of showing the whole creation what he's like. In fact, do you know what he says about us? He says we are the display of his splendor. Now, I don't know about you, but I kind of never thought of myself as the display of anyone's splendor. And so it's like, really, God? You think I am the display of your splendor? That I show not only the heavens and the earth, but all of creation. I show what you're like, not nearly well enough, I'm sure. So that's kind of motivating for me on some things to see how I can be a better display of his splendor. We'll get to that in a minute. So he makes us to be with us. He makes us to show off his glory, his splendor. And he makes us because he's got work for us to do. Oh, we don't get to just hang around? No. He says in the other part of Ephesians 2:10, he says, we're his masterpieces, his work of art, created in Christ Jesus for good works that he's already prepared for us. So he has made each one of us with purposes, with things that he wants us to do. And so we're in the process in our lives, we're in a journey of discovering who he made us to be and what he made us to do. And so the becoming is the who kind of thing, and the doing is the what he has for us to do. And so we're always becoming and we're always doing. Now let me talk about, let me just make sure, talk a little about becoming. So my granddaughter, she's 2, her name is Grace. She has 3 big brothers and another baby coming. And Grace is outgoing, very outgoing, highly opinionated, and loves to FaceTime. So she says to her mother, several times a week, call Jidu. Jidu is my grandmother name. My first grandson tried to say Judy, and he kept saying Jidu instead, so there you go. And she says, call Jidu, call Jidu. And you know, in FaceTime, there's a pause before the picture comes up. And so I'm waiting, and she's waiting, and then when our faces appear, she goes, Jidu, Jidu! And I go, oh yeah, whatever you'd like, Grace, what can I do for you? Because she's in the process of becoming the person God created her to be. She's very different from her brother Aiden. Aiden is an artist and a writer, and he's only 8, but a scientist, and he's kind of sneaky and clever too. He knows exactly what to do to get his brothers. So they go, he's so mean to us. I said, if you'd ignore him, he wouldn't do it. No, he's always trying to get us upset because he's clever like that. And so we're watching them becoming who God made them to be. Now we're hoping some of those characteristics get smoothed out a little, but we're in this process of discovering who we are. When my kids were young, I read to them a lot of books, about 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000. When they were upset, we read. That was my way of handling things. One of our favorite writers was a man named Stephen Cosgrove, and he had a lot of books, but I haven't seen them at all lately. But one of them's called Flutterby. And I'm going to tell you the story of Flutterby very briefly. Flutterby was born one morning in the fall as a small, tiny winged horse. And she was in a cocoon, and she fought her way out of the cocoon, and she looked around and she said, who am I and what am I supposed to do? And she looked down and she saw a bunch of ants, and she says, maybe I'm an ant. So she went down there and she was gathering food with the ants, and then she didn't fit in the ant hole. And they laughed at her and they said, silly girl, you're not an ant. She goes, oh. So she flew up and she said, I wonder who I am and what I'm supposed to do. And then she saw the honeybees, and she says, that's what I am. So she went with them and gathered honey, and sure enough, she goes to the hive, and well, you know, as she tried to back into the hive like the bee was doing, she got stung. And she went, ow, jumped out, and the bee said, silly girl, you're not a bee. She goes, oh, who am I and what am I supposed to do? And then she saw the butterflies. She says, they have wings like I have. I bet I'm a butterfly. And so she kind of hung around with them and flitted around until they landed on leaves. And the leaves held them because they were so light. So she just came down to land on a leaf, and she fell to the ground. And she just burst into tears. She says, who am I and what am I supposed to do? And this wise old monarch comes and he says, what's the matter? She says, I don't know who I am and what I'm supposed to do. And he said, well, what can you do? She says, I can fly as high as I can fly, and I can see as far as I can see. He says, oh, I know who you are and what you're supposed to do. You're the guardian of the frost. You're to fly as high as you can and look as far as you can so that you can see the frost coming in time to warn the ants and the bees and the butterflies to go to safety so they'll survive the winter. And she flew away as she did, as happy as she could be. Now, all of us are asking those kind of questions of who am I and what am I supposed to do? And the who I am has kind of two parts. It's the person we've been talking about that God formed, and then the person that you become as you live out your life. As people influence you, as you're in relationship with other people, as you learn and are in school, and you begin to see, who am I? And other people can see it, and they will tell you, your personality is this, and I love to be with you because you encourage me. And oh, I have a friend, and I bet some of you are this way, who, she's got 1,000 ideas, and it's like, oh dear, I don't need another idea, so no. But people influence us and help us figure out who we are. But then we're always wanting also to figure out what we're supposed to do. And there's just a few questions that I find help us figure out some of that, though it is a journey. You might figure it out for now, this week, this year, this season, but then there's going to be something else because God's not through making us who he wants us to be. But he's going to let other people help you discover what it is that you do well. That some gifts are obvious. You can sing. Okay, I'm a writer primarily. I can write decently, and people seem to mostly like my writing. And so I'm not the best in the world by any means. But those things are more obvious, but other things. So when somebody comes up to you after you have done something, and they say, oh, that blessed me so much, or that encouraged me, or you really helped me understand something. Those are the clues that we hold on to when we're trying to figure out what it is that we will be doing with our lives. My daughter, my younger daughter, has been counseling people since she was about 12 years old. All her friends came to her for counseling, and they said, you helped me so much. And her friends would say to me, you have no idea how much your daughter has helped me work through some things. So guess what? She's a counselor, and she went to school, and I said it about halfway through her first year. And I said, so what are you thinking? She says, oh, this is such an affirmation that this is what God wants me to be doing, is that she just does it naturally. My husband calls it the jet stream. When we are doing something that God gifted us to do or he put in us, it's like we're in the jet stream. I fly way too much for my liking. When you're going from east to west, it takes longer to go the same distance as it does to come from west to east, because the jet stream goes west to east. And so when you're coming that way, you can make the same trip in an hour or more less time than if you're going the other way. And the same is true when we're trying to operate and do the things God has for us to do in our own strength that's not gifting or not the temperament that he's put in us. Then it's like we're climbing uphill in the mud. But when we're doing what God has created us to do, then it's like we're flying in the jet stream. Now, I'd like to tell you that his plan is for you to do that all your life, but that wouldn't cause you to grow very much. So he also loves to bring in a few little opportunities to have to trust him, like something you're not any good at all at. For example, one year when I was editing our magazine, they said, well, you need to learn to do the budget. I went, not a good idea. And they said, no, this will be a good learning thing for you. It'll expand you. So after a year, they gave me an administrator because the budget was a disaster, because that's just not something I do very well. Then I married somebody who just lives and breathes numbers. And so we have a good match. He does numbers, I do words. And It works. But there will be the times, whether it's things you have to do that aren't your natural bent, or whether there are hard circumstances in your life, or whether people aren't encouraging and affirming. There's so many things. Carla and I were talking about lots of ways, and I could tell you just from the last 2 or 3 days, a list of people who are struggling with some things. But you know what? Those are incredibly important times, because those are when we grow. When we're doing the things we love and that we do naturally, there's great fruit, it's wonderful, but we don't grow very much, except maybe in our thinking we know what we're doing. But when we go through the harder times, then we'll find that God does a work in us. And really and truly, the most important thing is that we're becoming more and more like Jesus. And as much as he has works he's created us for, and as much as he's made us with certain gifts and talents, his greatest desire is that we look more and more like Jesus. And he said that we can do nothing on our own. Now, most of you are pretty young, and you probably still think you can do things on your own. What do you think, Diane? Can people do anything on their own? Not really. We can try. But God says in John 15, he says, no, on your own, you can do nothing. But he says, if you will abide in me, if you will live in my spirit, he says, you can do greater things than even Jesus did. And you can reflect what he's like, because increasingly his character is being formed in us. His likeness is becoming true of us. Just like my little grandson more and more is looking like his dad, we can look more and more like Jesus as we let him do his work in us. And one last thought. The work he wants to do in you and the work he wants to do through you is far more than you've ever imagined. Some of it will be big and important, some of it not so much, but it's still what he created you for. And it's more. He tells us that we haven't seen, we haven't heard what he wants to do in us and through us. He says you can't even imagine, you could never even ask for as much as I would like to do in you. It's far more than anything that you could have thought of. And so our job, yeah, we have to discover ourselves and who he's made us, and that's a good journey. But we also have to grow in intimacy with him, in closeness to him, so that he can live through us and open the doors, open the opportunities, lead us on the path that takes us to do the things that he created us for.